Welcome to Satsunami. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Satsunami. I'm Satsunami and joining me on my adventure to the moon tonight is my very good friend Adam. Adam, welcome back.
Hello. It's good to be back. I've actually got a related news topic here, Satsunami, to do with our episode today. So did you hear about that new restaurant on the moon?
I did not.
Oh, apparently great food, but no atmosphere.
This is by far the shortest episode of Satsunami. Well done, Adam.
Oh, how could you hate that? That's an amazing dad joke.
You know, I'm sure you've told me that before, but whether or not you have, honestly, it is funny every time.
I think there's 100% chance I've said that at least once before.
For all our dedicated Satsunami fans out there, go through the old episodes, see if Adam's brought out this one, because I've got a sneaking suspicion.
Don't ask me for the fraud that I am. I've no new material.
All we'll have to do is look through your memories and see if you have, which definitely is such a natural way to segue into the topic at hand tonight.
Beautifully done. Sometimes you just got to take your hat off and just be like, it's a masterpiece.
So, yeah, today we are going to be talking about a indie gem known as To the Moon. Now, when I say indie gem, I actually mean it non-ironically. I'm not saying that like, oh, an indie gem like Mario. No. I'm talking about a true indie gem tonight. So, of course, the game we're going to be talking about is To the Moon, which is It is really hard to describe this game, and don't worry, Adam, I won't leave the plot summary to you this time because I know you get anxious when I turn around and I'm like, Adam, would you like to describe the game?
Oh man, I had my written summary all out with all these different names and everything.
So, To the Moon is a game that focuses around two scientists who work for an organisation known as the Sigmund Corporation. Now, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think the Sigmund Corporation in this game is pretty much a cross between the Make-A-Wish Foundation and the guys from Inception?
Pretty much that. If that organisation was run by Sigmund Freud, I think is a good way to describe it.
Yeah, he's the final boss in this. Spoilers.
Oh my god.
He's got three forms: id, ego, superego. I'm sorry, but I spent 1 year studying social sciences. I'll use that psychology degree, damn it.
And he hits you with the Oedipus complex as his final move.
Yeah, it was a very dark game. No, I'm only kidding. It basically follows these two scientists whose main job is to basically rummage through their clients' memories and alter them so they can make their final wish come true when they're on their deathbed. In the case of this game, they go to visit a man called Johnny, who is wanting to go to the moon, as the title suggests, of course, but as they ask him, why do you want to go to the moon, Johnny simply replies that he doesn't quite know, and the whole game kind of revolves around pretty much their adventures into this man's mind to try and make his last wish come true. Would you say that's a fair summary?
I think that is an excellent summary. Again, it annoys me that you can do these things so well, and I struggle so mightily to explain the plot to a Sonic game, but there we go.
To be fair, it's more complicated than this game, and I don't mean that as a slight against To the Moon.
The pedestrian storytelling of To the Moon. Where's the final hazard and Gerald Robotnik?
It's like that meme where it's like the Chad Sonic story writing. Hedgehogs with guns, that's what I'm saying this game needed.
It's going to be the next big thing, I tell you.
Exactly. We're going to take it to the moon, damn it. But yeah, I was really surprised at how long ago this game came out. So this game came out about nearly, at the time we're recording this, but nearly 11 years ago. And I'm quite curious to hear if you actually knew anything about this game, Adam, when it came out.
I knew nothing about this game until about 3 weeks ago when you brought it onto my radar. I'd never heard of it. Yeah, and no, it's that way. Sometimes you're like, oh, maybe I did hear about this. I know for a fact I never heard anything about this game at all until a few weeks ago.
Not even a peep, or
no, nothing at all. Even when I went through my kind of my initial kind of phase of indie gaming, I never remember hearing this one. I mean, now granted, I'm mainly a console player. It's gone to the Switch now, hasn't it? But for a long time, this was, I think, just a kind of PC, kind of Mac exclusive game. If I'm right in saying.
The only reason I heard about this game was through, and I just want to point this out before we go on. We are not sponsored by Humble Bundle. Humble Bundle, like, for those of you who don't know, they do monthly bundles of games, of software, and things like that, and you can pay like a certain amount to get whatever kind of tiers you want based on the games, the package. Absolutely fantastic service. But I remember I was in university around the time I bought this game, and I remember, I think it was around 2012, 2013. I was in my flat, and my flatmate came up to me and he said, "Oh, have you heard of Humble Bundle?" And he explained it, and it honestly sounded like a scam. It isn't, by the way, but it honestly sounded like a scam. I was like, what's the catch here? You know, because there were really good games at the time. But I remember I went through like very much a FOMO stage, because at the time it wasn't like it is now. There wasn't like books and software and all these different bundles being sold simultaneously. It was just like one particular, that's right, isn't it? It was just one particular bundle that they were selling at a time at the beginning.
I'll be honest, I didn't know about Humble Bundle until only a few years ago, so I can't speak on their practices before, I'll be honest.
Well, if I'm right, if there's any Humble Bundle like stands out there, as the cool kids say, you know, just just write us a letter.
The Humble Bundlers, as I call them.
Hey. To be fair, they wouldn't write to us, they are too humble.
That's the one good thing about it.
Okay, that's my dad joke out the way, so sorry. Back to the past. Around 2012, 2013, I remember they were selling I think it was a bundle called, it was like the RPG Maker bundle. And I remember, just out of fear for missing out, I was like, oh, I'll buy it. So I bought it. And I remember To the Moon was in this bundle. And it sat basically in my digital library for, I mean, until like a couple of months ago. It is sat there gathering dust. And I remember reading about this game, people saying, oh, it's so sad, oh, you're going to cry at it and everything. And I was like, yeah, I suppose, yeah. But I never played it. And you know, Adam, you know how bad I am for playing games.
Well, I mean, in fairness, there's so many out there. I totally get that FOMO, that FOMO like thing where you're just like, oh my god, but what if I do want to play this game and I don't get it at this time? And especially when you're like a student, and perhaps money's a bit tighter. You're like, I've got to maximize, I've got to take advantage of every deal. So I get it. It's fair. It's fair. I think this is where most people maybe build up their backlogs from this time in their life, where you're just like, I want to experience everything, and then you're like, oh my god, I just don't have time.
I mean, considering What Remains of Edith Finch, I mean, I only played that a couple of months ago as well, and that came out in 2017. If it wasn't for you, Adam, like, I would have never played that game. So, first of all, thank you, and second of all, damn you for making me go on like an indie spree of gaming.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, I think I only deserve part of the blame here. I'm pretty sure friend of the show Craig EC deserves some of the blame for this as well. Blame/credit.
He'll get his time when he comes back on this show, don't you worry. I'm writing a list as we speak.
The Satsu enemies list.
I mean, the Chatsu one, come on.
Fair enough, that's true.
Atari, what's the other one?
David Cage, you're on there.
David Cage, of course.
What's his fame? James Nguyen.
He is like on both the list and your list, to be fair.
He's on many lists, I'm sure.
But you know who's not on the list? Can Gao, who is the developer of this game and is part of Freebird Games, which, I'm going to be honest, before we jump into the main talking points of this game, were you quite surprised with the presentation of this game? Because I'm going to be honest, when I started it, I thought, and again, I know it's a 2011 RPG Maker game, but I was really taken aback by like the art style and stuff. I thought it was like really basic, and I thought there's no way this is going to be as poignant as people make it out to be. But I cried. I'm not even ashamed to say it. I cried at this game. But were you the same, Adam?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting talking about this game being like near 11 years old now because of those kind of 16-bit graphics. I find it very difficult to like gauge when a game was released now. I mean, this could have been released 11 years ago. I feel it could have been released last year. If you told me it was released in late 90s, I probably would have believed you as well. They do have a certain kind of timeless quality, the 16-bit graphic games. And yeah, like I think what's maybe most surprising for me about the kind of visuals is they are very misleading in a way in that I don't think you would expect the game to play out the way it does with the visuals, if that makes sense. It does look a bit kind of like a kind of something like a Chrono Trigger or like maybe an early Final Fantasy sort of knockoff. I don't mean knockoff, but do you know what I mean? Like kind of clone type game. I think that's what you'd be more expecting, just kind of judging on the visuals alone. So it is quite surprising the direction the game goes, because you wouldn't think that the graphics are a natural fit for that, but it certainly does. It does a lot with a little, and that's I think one of the big strengths of the game.
It's a completely misleading game, I'm going to be honest. When you go into this game, you honestly don't, and I don't mean this in a threatening way, by the way. I'm looking at a Red Panda lawyer, and the Red Panda lawyer is he's giving his thumbs up to say you're good to go, but genuinely, you will not really expect, like, judging by what you get to begin with, very misleading, but in all the right ways. I think that's the only time I'll ever say that, to be honest. But before we go on, will we just jump right into it?
Yeah, let's get on our rocket ship and blast off.
And before we jump into this, I just want to give you lovely listeners at home basically 2 warnings. First of all, we will be diving into spoilers, and honestly, if you haven't played this game and you don't want to be spoiled, this game's only about 3 or 4 hours long. So if you want to experience it for yourself, by all means, pause the episode, go away, play it, and then come back and listen to this, because it is a fantastic experience. And usually I would save this to the end. I would say, like, oh, I think this game's great, go play it, but genuinely, if you haven't played it, wholeheartedly recommend it. It's definitely in my top 10 games. Second of all, we are going to be talking about themes relating to death and maybe some other kind of heavy topics within this game. So just a fair content warning, just in case you're, expecting a bit more of a light-hearted episode, which it will be a little bit light-hearted, because come on, it's Satsunami. But yeah, just in case. So without any further ado, as you said, Adam, let's jump in a rocket ship and we will head to the moon. So as we're heading to the moon, please stand by for these transmissions. Welcome to Satsunami, a variety podcast that talks about topics from gaming and films to streaming and general interests.
Previously on Chatsunami, we discussed Game of the Decade, Deadly Premonition, the romantic thriller, Birdemic, and listen to us get all sappy as we discuss our top 5 Christmas films.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can find us on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, and all good podcast apps. As always, stay safe,
stay awesome, and most importantly,
stay hydrated.
We are Beer and Chill Podcast.
Podcast where we review TV shows, games, movies, and whatever else takes our fancy.
So what are you waiting for? If you're a cool kid like us, you're gonna listen to the Beer and Chill Podcast. You can get it anywhere from Spotify all the way to your grandmother's radio. My name is Jan.
And I'm Craigie C.
And we are
Beer and Chill.
So Adam, I've got to ask, what were your first impressions of this game? Because I feel as if this game is like what Edith Finch is to you. It's like I have the same kind of feelings towards this game. I think this is a fantastic indie game, and I remember, like, after playing this, bombarding you constantly to be like, Adam, play this game, Adam, play this game. And you must have been like, how do I block his number?
I was more tech savvy.
No, that's your fault, not mine.
Very true, very true.
But yeah, what was your first impressions, going into this game and, just in general as you played through the game?
I was actually, before I played this game, I was very excited to try it out because, as you mentioned, you'd been full of praise for it, and I could tell, this wasn't like faux praise at all. You really did love this game. It affected you. So I was really, really keen to start it, because I'm always interested to find games like this that do kind of hit you on an emotional level. So I was very, very excited to fire it up. I have to be honest, the first 20 minutes, I didn't think I was going to like it. I'll be honest. I found the 2 main characters, as you mentioned in the intro, are 2 scientists working for this Sigmund Corps. I found one of them very annoying, and the thought of spending a lot of time in this character's presence, I was like, I'm not looking forward to this. I wasn't really engaged by the story to start with. I don't know, I kind of was like, okay, I'm waiting for something to happen here. I'm waiting to get hooked in. And I probably went in with too high expectations, which is my own fault. I know I should have probably tempered a bit more and let the game kind of get going. But yeah, nothing really grabbed me for, I'd say, the first 20 minutes. But I kept going with it, and I thought, well, like, I'm sure something is going to happen soon that'll grab me in. And sure enough, it did. There's a point where you have to go into the basement of the house for the first time. One of the scientists stays to basically set up the equipment that will allow the two of them to enter the dying man Johnny's kind of dreams and undertake this task of sending him to the moon. But while one of them sets up the machinery, the other one kind of gets to explore the house for a bit, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here, Satsu. But you go into a particular room in the basement, and it's filled with these origami rabbits, and the game all of a sudden took on a very kind of creepy kind of vibe, and it kind of sent a shift, and I was like, ooh, okay, here we go, this has got me hooked now. And from there, yep, I was really kind of hooked into it. I really enjoyed discovering the story. I thought it unfolded really well. It's very poignant, it's very moving. Yeah, like, I think it's an excellent narrative experience. Of that, there's no doubt. So those first 20 minutes, I say, I found them a bit of a struggle, but it was well worth pushing through that and to experience what this game has to offer.
Funny you say that, because I had a very similar experience going into this game. This is a danger about going into a game that is so highly praised, because you're going to go into this game with such high expectations and kind of think, oh, this is going to be the best game ever, it's going to make me weep, it's going to make me cry, I better turn on my camera and record myself, oh, look at all these tears. But I do agree, the first kind of 10-15 minutes, or even 20, as you said, like, the beginning is quite slow moving. And I remember the first moment where you play as you said, the two doctors, Eva Rosalene and Neil Watts. You go through, and I know what you mean about Neil in this game. He is quite full on. He's a bit of a, excuse my language here, but a bit of a shit poster, I would like to imagine, online. He would be like a mean meme machine. And of course, it's that kind of stereotypical dynamic. Neil is very much the class clown who likes to joke around. Eva is very much the kind of straight face, no nonsense, the odd couple of the science world, essentially. And as you said, when you look through the house, I did get creeped out when you go into that room and it's just filled with origami rabbits. Not because I had David Cage flashbacks. I was a little bit worried, not gonna lie. I thought he'd snuck in somehow.
He's a sneaky devil. He shows up when you least expect.
It's like, those like .exe games you get?
Yeah.
Where it is like, you're playing it and you think, oh, I'm playing a normal game. And it's just like David Cage's face slowly morphing into the screen. It's like, no!
The horror.
I don't want to play Heavy Rain again in 16 bits.
The QuickTime events, no.
Fortunately, this game doesn't have QuickTime events. I was relieved. But the gameplay itself is... Well, we talk about the gameplay, because before we go on to talk about, the good points of this game, and there are, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good points in this, will we talk about the weakest aspect of it?
I think that's a good idea. Let's get that out of the way.
What did you think of the quote-unquote gameplay of this?
The gameplay is my kind of biggest problem with this game, and because I think there's both too little of the gameplay but also too much, and that probably sounds very contradictory, but what I mean by that is, so the main sort of task, the main kind of things you'll be doing in this game is, as you enter kind of each memory of Johnny, you have to kind of explore around and find this object that's going to allow you to travel to the next memory. And to do that, you need to find like 5, are they called memory orbs? Memory spheres? I can't quite remember the term for them. But you need to find 5 of these basically to unlock the item that's going to let you travel. And you just kind of find those by like examining some things or by, just exploring parts of the environment. And then the other kind of main gameplay mechanic is a sliding puzzle, which you have to do when you've kind of unlocked the particular item for the kind of memory jump. And you need to, it's like a sliding puzzle, and you need to line it up to make a full image. On one hand, it feels really perfunctory, and I was never engaged by it, and I found it a bit boring, to be honest. To keep repeatedly doing the sliding tile puzzles and just kind of like walking around. And sometimes you're like, okay, that makes sense why I got a memory orb for looking at that item. But sometimes I would just walk into a part of the map and it would give me one, and I was like, well, why did I get one for that? I don't really understand. But also as well, not only is it too limited, but it feels like there's too much of it for me, because I feel like it gets in the way of the story. I was really I really got drawn into the story, and I really wanted to find out more, but I really resented having to kind of bumble around the environment for a good few minutes looking for these orbs, and then having to solve a sliding tile puzzle. It felt like just such a pace killer and such an unnatural one, and just kind of been like, oh, it's a game, so here you go, do some gameplay. And I'm like, oh, but I just want to experience the story. I do feel a lot of games sometimes feel that they have to kind of put gameplay in there to justify it being a game, but sometimes you're like, you know what, you can just limit it. It's okay. Sometimes a narrative is strong enough to hold a game by itself, and I think this is definitely one. So that was my problem with the gameplay. Just too little, but also too much.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I feel as if, in kind of mild spoilers for the subsequent sequels, Finding Paradise and Imposter Factory, which, by the way, both fantastic games as well, I feel as if the gameplay itself can sometimes get in the way of the narrative. I totally agree with that, because see, with the sliding puzzles, I was really worried that, because at the very beginning, you get like a timer, or not a timer, but like a vital chart of Johnny's condition. And I genuinely thought that if you didn't complete the game in time, or if you did something wrong in the tile puzzle, then, you know, something would happen to him in the real world. And I was really worried about that, but it turns out that's just inconsequential. It doesn't matter. You can basically bum about in his memories for as long as you want, which I was kind of like, on the one hand, I'm like, great, that's fine, but at the same time, I liked looking for the mementos. I will say this, I think it's a clever idea, and I think it's something that Imposter Factory probably does the best out the trilogy. And again, before I go on, I just want to say I'm not going to say any spoilers for Finding Paradise and Imposter Factory. As I said, I love those games as well, but I feel as if for this one, it can kind of be excused because it is the first game. I think Finding Paradise kind of does something a little bit worse in terms of the gameplay, but when I forced you to play the game, Adam, you'll see what I'm talking about, but it's not the strongest aspect, and I do feel as if it really holds it back in some ways, and it gets kind of frustrating because you are looking for, you know, the last memento and everything, and it does get annoying sometimes where you're kind of distracted from the story that you're so invested in. Because I have to admit, we heard the same when there was mementos like blocking a certain part of the story, and you were like really invested in the story, and you're like, oh man, I'm gonna do this now.
That was my big problem. I really hated that because I was like, oh, why is this here? Like, there's no reason for this, you know, this puzzle to be here, or this like key hunt thing to be here for me. It's just like, oh, it's gameplay because it's a game for the sake of that. And it really annoyed me because like, you've made such an interesting story. Why are you like artificially slowing me down and stopping me from experiencing this? And I think as well it annoys me a little bit because I think the concepts for the gameplay are actually pretty good. You know, I do think that idea of exploring and finding, you know, these kind of mementos is an interesting idea, and I think I just kind of wish it had been, if it had been broadened out a bit more, so it was a bit more kind of, you know, investigative, and there was maybe a bit more of like trying to like puzzle solving, you know, you're trying to work out how things fit together, I think could have been interesting. I don't think the sliding puzzle thing is really any kind of way to make that, well, again, personal opinion here, but I don't think there's really any way to make that good. I don't know, it just doesn't really interest me. And there's also another section where you reach a point where you're not able to go any further back into Johnny's memories, and so basically they have to try and find the two scientists have to try and find a kind of artificial like workaround to get back. And there comes a bit where you have like different versions of Johnny, and you have to like line up certain items almost as like a kind of, not a tile puzzle, but almost a kind of one of the, I don't know what you call them, but you know, like a kind of like join the dots, again is wrong, but that kind of idea. And again, I'm like, I think there's something really interesting there, and I wish that had been like a kind of more puzzle solving one where you had all these items and you had to reason about, well, why would this fit, you know, how can that link? But again, it just felt very kind of perfunctory and quite limited. So again, like, it's encouraging to hear that, especially for the third game, maybe they did solve a bit more of these issues. But yeah, again, it's not a deal breaker. It doesn't stop me from recommending the game, but I do think it is a slight issue, and it's something I think to be prepared about, you know. And it's a good thing as well, because you just want to experience the story. It's just frustrating that there's like this artificial block on that.
because that's the kind of worry about games like this. I think this is probably something that we have talked about in our narrative versus gameplay episode, where it's like a lot of games do struggle to try and balance between the narrative and the gameplay aspect. Is it going to be like Tetris, where there's barely any story but it's a really fun game? Or is it going to be something like Edith Finch, where it's kind of little gameplay but a lot of narrative going into it? And I feel as if the narrative in this game is definitely the highlight of this entire experience, which I know it sounds like a broken record here, but when you play through the game, as we've been saying, there are genuine moments where you do get frustrated because you do kind of feel held back because you want to learn more about the story in a good way. You want to learn what's going on with Johnny. Why is he acting like this? And in particular, when you see that his memory has been fractured, that was really interesting because you thought, well, what's missing in this huge chunk? And I remember trying to actually get over to the other side in that bit, and I got down to the bottom, and then I kind of technically clipped through the map, I think, at one point, or one of the tiles, and then I was like, okay, this isn't the way I'm supposed to go, we have to go back the other way, we have to do the gameplay again, and it was just like, oh god. But before we go on to the narrative, and I absolutely gush about this game, there's one particular moment I'm quite curious to hear what you have to say about this, Adam. The penultimate action scene at the very end, or maybe it is the final, but the scene at the end where you're trying to, and again, spoilers for the story, you're trying to fight against Eva, and she sends out all the quote-unquote zombie Evas out to stop you. I'm not going to lie, I wasn't a big fan of that, because again, it felt as if they were trying to gamify the game, which I know, gamify the game is a video game, but it was just kind of drawn away from the narrative. Like, what did you think about that particular sequence?
Yeah, I found it a bit annoying as well. In that, I found the controls quite imprecise for trying to avoid things. Sometimes I felt like sometimes some traps would just appear up, and I was like, well, I don't see how I can avoid this. Like, you know, the controls aren't precise enough to let me do quick enough movement, so that kind of annoyed me. And as well, I think the big thing is that there's like no stakes. You know, it's funny because you talked about, you know, you thought there was this timer to the game, but it turns out there's not. And I kind of, in a way, I kind of almost wished there had been a timer, because I think that would have made for a more interesting experience as well, where, you know, maybe you want to find out more about each memory, but you're like, oh god, I've got this like timer I'm up against. And I kind of wish that gameplay segment had something. And as far as I know, it doesn't. Like, so it doesn't matter how long it takes you to fight your way past the zombies and avoid the traps and stuff. It doesn't have any bearing on the game. And so again, it just feels like another artificial like lengthening element, and it's just like, oh, here's some gameplay because it's a game, and it's like, oh, I don't want more gameplay. I want to experience this amazing story that you've made. So yeah, another bit that I found quite frustrating.
I would say that's probably the worst bit in terms of gameplay. I can see what they were trying to go for, but I think probably the main issue here is just because it is the first game in the series. Don't get me wrong, they do try different things in the sequel, but there's a particular sequence in that really bugs me. And don't worry, Adam, as I said, when I strong arm you into playing it, you'll know exactly what bit I mean. But going back to the Moon, I don't know. I feel as if they could have scaled it back, but see for like a first attempt at a game like this and what they managed to achieve with it, I honestly thought they did a great job regardless, but I agree. I think they could have definitely toned it down. But one thing they didn't tone down was, of course, the narrative. So before, as I said, I go and absolutely gush over this game, Adam, what did you think of the story?
Well, as I said, after the kind of rough beginning for me where I wasn't very engaged with it, very quickly I got so drawn into this. The story unfolds very well, and that you learn just enough through each memory to keep you drawn. So you learn a little bit more, but you know, it's not given away too quickly, and so it builds up really nicely. I thought it deals with some interesting issues. You know, there's a large focus. This is on kind of marriage, and as well, where one of the characters, I think it's implied, has kind of an Asperger's type syndrome. I think there's some really interesting kind of commentary about, especially about living with that, about having a partner who has a condition like that. And yeah, I think it's just really well done. It builds, there's lots of really interesting, it hooks you really well because you are so intrigued about why is this his dying wish to go to the moon, and why can't he tell you? It's a really great central hook to kind of reel you in and then to build from there. And as I said, the story unfolds really well. I think there's some great characters in it. I think the two scientists, from the kind of rough beginnings for me with Dr. Watts, I think both scientists actually kind of grow as characters and become a lot more endearing, and you kind of enjoy, learning more about them, learn more about their relationship. It's fascinating to learn more about Johnny, and there's some great moments there that are actually quite shocking, and there's a real creepiness to this game that I did not expect at all. And it starts with those origami rabbits, and there's just other bits as well peppered throughout the game that really just kind of actually put my kind of hair on end a little bit. And I was like, is this going to turn into like a full-blown horror experience? And spoiler alert, it never really does, and I don't think it needs to either. I'm kind of glad that it doesn't devolve into that. I think the kind of creepy level that the undertones that it has are perfect. But there's also some great humor in this game. There's a bit, one of my favorite bits is in the second half of the game when they're trying to figure out a way to get to spark this wish in Johnny to go to the moon. You just get this kind of montage of both doctors like showing up at like random points in his life and like screaming like, "Go to the moon! It's great out here up there," and all this stuff. And that really made me laugh. So I think there's really funny moments. There's really creepy moments. There's really heartfelt moments. Really melancholic moments. You get a full kind of kaleidoscope of emotions to this game. I think it's done so well. So I'll pass the floor over to you now because I feel it's only fair to hear your thoughts and give you a chance just to speak on this.
Oh, I love it. End of episode. Go play this game.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. Yeah, absolutely. But no, it would be a very short episode. I would have to make this a Chatsu Shorts to just be like 10 out of 10, go play it. I absolutely adore this story. This is, again, going back to what you were saying, when I started playing this game, I kept asking myself those questions. Is this the sad bit? Am I supposed to be sad at this bit? Am I supposed to be, emotional? I was not feeling that for the first couple of minutes, and it's a slow build up, but it slowly kind of grows on you until it grabs you, and you think, oh my god, this story is absolutely fantastic. It's got so many great elements. Going back to what you were saying about Dr. Watts and Dr. Rosalene, I love their development in this game because, to begin with, as you said, Neil is very much a kind of meme poster. He's very in your face. He's like, oh, look at me, I'm doing the Kamehameha on the memento and everything. I totally get it, but he definitely does grow because, see, the more you think about it, the way they talk to one another, it definitely sounds as if Neil and Eva have been through so many experiences like this. This isn't their first assignment or anything together. They're just kind of stuck in this, I don't want to say 9-to-5 job because let's face it, it's not really a 9-to-5 job, but they're stuck in this world where all they have to do is make somebody's wish come true. In the later games, you can see other scientists and things, and even the minisodes which come along with this game, they are great, by the way. I don't know if you got a chance to play those, Adam.
No, I haven't had a chance to play them yet.
They are actually quite interesting because it gives you more insight into Sigmund Corp as, like an organisation and how they interact with other scientists and things like that. It's really, really interesting. But my point is that they grow throughout the game. Like, Neo goes from as a wisecracking individual to someone who, quite frankly, by the end of it, does have a heart of gold, but he just struggles to express it in a serious way. And the same with Eva, she's got a heart of gold as well, but she struggles to kind of express it at the cost of kind of jeopardising the task at hand. And I think that their character development is absolutely fantastic. But the other thing that I absolutely love is the relationship between Johnny and River, who, as you said, it's heavily implied that River suffers from Asperger's syndrome, which I have to admit, this is something that is quite rare in games. This isn't a kind of thing that you see often in a lot of video games, and it's quite interesting to see the way Kangao shows this character, how he characterizes her as being very hyper fixated on certain things. She, of course, loves rabbits, which Johnny doesn't really know why she loves rabbits until it's revealed at the end. And don't worry, we will go into the end, but you know, she's got all these origami rabbits. It definitely leaves like breadcrumbs throughout the game that you want to know more. You want to know why River's so obsessed with these rabbits. You want to know why Johnny wants to go to the moon. And I just want to point out, I love that scene when you're playing as Eva and you're looking through the school. You're like, what the hell's Neil? And then you go into the auditorium and he's pretending to be like a guy from NASA. And he's like, the moon's so cool, you can go to the moon. And Johnny has zero interest. Johnny's just like, why would I want to go to the moon? I don't want to go to the moon. He's like, are you sure? It's cool. And this actually solves one of the main issues that I think people would have with a narrative, because you would think, what's the point in them going through all of this like trouble? Why don't they just say, oh yeah, you won a ticket, here you go, here's a ticket to the moon, yay, you've been to the moon, now we can go home and sleep. We've fulfilled our mission, as it were. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more of that kind of human element of trying to understand why Johnny wants to go to the moon, rather than, you know, focusing on the solution. They're trying to focus on the why rather than the how. And I think it's just absolutely fantastically done. My other question, though, is what did you think of the twist in this game?
Creepy is the wrong word for this one. You know, when you reach that memory, you can just tell something bad is going to happen here. I think it's done really well. And it's that funny way that you want to see what's going to happen, but on the other level, you don't. It's not particularly a pleasant bit of the game to experience, I'll be honest, but I think it's done pretty well. And, you know, as I said, you know something bad's going to happen, and you can kind of... It doesn't so much come out of nowhere. It's not like a complete shock, because you can tell something bad's going to happen. And then as well, once events are in motion, you can pretty much write out what's going to happen here. But I think it is poignant, and it does... I think it is an interesting thing, and I think it does... It feels like a kind of logical thing in a way, and it helps to explain some of the, you know, events you've seen, you know, after, especially why Johnny's mother calls him a particular name. It helps to flesh out Johnny a bit more and his experiences. So, yeah, like, as much as it is a pretty, you know, unpleasant event, like, I do think it is pretty well done.
It's definitely a lot more kind of dark, and is macabre the right word, would you say, for this kind of particular sequence?
I'm struggling to, like, unnerving is maybe the... Foreboding, I think, is the one I would maybe use, because it's not like I said, it's not creepy, and it's dark, but it's not that kind of, you know, it's not that kind of dark, but it is that sort of unnerving foreboding that you just know something's not right, and you know something important, but something like horrible is going to happen here.
Because it was that moment where Neil and Eva are talking about the situation, and they're like, well, how does Johnny have such a good recollection of this particular part? And I have to admit, the way they actually frame it, which I think is absolutely fantastic, the imagery for an RPG Maker game is absolutely amazing, because on the one side, you've got like this white void where there's nothing, and that's what's preventing them from actually getting to the other side of this like kind of chasm where there's, you know, the family home and everything. And of course the main twist is, and this is your last opportunity guys to back out, but the major twist in this game is the fact that Johnny has a twin brother called Joey, who unfortunately passes away because his mum accidentally hits him with a car as he's like playing with a ball. She's reversing out, she hits him, it's very tragic, and because of that, Johnny ends up getting put on beta blockers, which severely limits his memory from that time period. It's an absolutely tragic moment, because at the same time, during that period of Johnny's life, he ended up meeting River in a carnival, and they have this absolutely beautiful sequence where they're sitting on a log and they're saying how the moon looks like a rabbit, like the moon is like the tummy of the rabbit and the stars around it make up the body and everything. It's just such like a beautiful and innocent scene, but because Johnny was put on beta blockers, he also forgot a lot of those sequences from his formative years. So he believes that the first time he met River was when he went to school with her. And looking back on it, it is quite tragic because in real life, River starts to experience a lot of, to Johnny at least, very strange habits. Because she's got Asperger's syndrome, she's not very vocal with her thoughts and her feelings. Because of that, she does things like she cuts her hair short, she tries to make all of these paper rabbits and things, and of course when she eventually passes away, Johnny's kind of left quite confused and emotional about it. He even confides in his friends that she was getting worse by the day. And the main reason which brought me to tears that he wants to go to the moon is because when Johnny ends up going to the carnival and meeting River for the first time, they both end up going to quite a secluded place underneath this tree, and they're both sitting on a log because River, having Asperger's syndrome, she has found like this one place where she feels comfortable in. I'm assuming that this is a place that she always comes when she goes to the carnival, but then she sees Johnny and goes to kind of run away, and then, eventually they build up a kind of very limited but very powerful dialogue, and they basically promise each other that if they should forget one another or get lost, then they should regroup on the moon, which is like the kind of turning point. My jaw dropped and I was like, oh my god, that's the reason. I was kind of like, don't cry yet, Satsu, don't cry. Did you feel the same way when that kind of revelation came up?
Yeah, it's an absolutely lovely scene, that one, and it's a great reveal. It's a perfect way to reveal this, the reasons behind why he wants to go to the moon, why that's his wish. It's just a lovely scene, and it's so well done. The dialogue is perfect. It fits in tonally. It fits in, and it's just a lovely scene. So yeah, I think a real high point of the game.
And then, of course, we get one of the other twists where Eva is so like hell-bent on getting Johnny to the moon once they realise what's going on and why he wants to go to the moon, that she decides to try and rewrite his memories. And I'm not going to lie, I'm going to be honest with you listeners, the first time I saw this scene, I was so angry at Eva, because basically what she does is, angry is the wrong word, maybe just frustrated, because when I first saw this, she rewrites Johnny's memories so that River is no longer a part of his memories, but Joey is. She creates this entirely different reality where Joey's alive and he sees his brother Johnny get accepted into NASA and everything. Before I go on to say the twist upon the twist for that, despite the fact that Neil is of course trying to stop Eva from doing that, which I do think is a beautiful moment as well. It really shows a lot about his character. But when you saw River getting erased, like, how did you feel about that?
Yeah, it's very melancholic. It's very sad, but there was one line that stood out to me. I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but basically Eva says something to the effect of Johnny doesn't need River, but he needs his brother, and in a way that they can exist simultaneously together. And, I thought that added a kind of layer of depth, and it just made it all the more melancholic, because you thought, it's great that he's got his brother back because they seem to have such a close relationship, but it's so sad that River is basically being erased from his life. So to me, it added this kind of great complexity to that scene, and it just made it that much more powerful and that much more affecting when you're like, I want to be happy for Johnny that Joey's alive and that he doesn't have to go through that kind of traumatic experience, but I'm so sad for Johnny for that, and for River, especially sad for Johnny, because you kind of have to feel sorry on his behalf, because he doesn't know, because River's basically being like erased from his life at this point. He doesn't know, and that just makes it all the more kind of tragic in its own way. I think as well, the thing with Johnny and River's relationship is when you see it to begin with in some of the later memories, you can just tell it's not perfect by any stretch, and there is a sort of level of unhappiness here, between the two, and we don't quite know. Well, we know obviously that Johnny, is confused by River's actions and frustrated to an extent. It does feel like it being with her has imposed a kind of restriction on his life to an extent, and you can tell there is like some resentment there, which is a human reaction. I don't think we can really damn him for feeling that, because it is just a human, response to that situation. But then as we find out more and we understand more about River and the fact that she really struggles, she can't just say to Johnny, "Oh, do you not remember when we met as young?" Because she can. That's because of the Asperger's syndrome or whatever it is. She can't just take a course like that. So she's trying to do other things, makes it all the more kind of heartbreaking just to try and jog his memory. But you see how happy it was, like that, from that scene where they first met and early on, and the fact that she's getting a raise. It makes it for such a melancholic and affecting experience, that whole bit.
It's a tough one to judge, right enough, because as you said, on the one hand, he is getting his brother back, he's getting the life he always wanted. Well, maybe not the life he always wanted, but he's getting this life that's very ideal. He has a very happy family life, and I think there's one scene earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's when River and Johnny are getting married, and I'm pretty sure his mum calls him Joey.
I think she has it a couple of times, but you're definitely right. There's one moment at the wedding.
And of course, somebody asks, "What's that all about?" And he says, "Oh, it's my granddad's name," and makes a lie. You pass it off and think, "Oh, right, okay, it's just this woman's probably getting older. Maybe she's not of sound mind at this point and everything." By the time you realise who Joey actually is, because you can see, even with the pixels, I'm going to say this, see, even with a game about pixels, the amount of emotion you get and the kind of happiness, sadness through the way the characters act, the way they talk, even the wee kind of, like at the very end where, the spoilers, but they achieve their mission, and Neil ends up going closer to Eva, and he tries to put his arm around her, and then she like bats it away, and just that kind of like 1 second joke, it honestly just made me laugh, because I thought that is just such like a small but really funny moment. But the other thing that I want to point out before we talk about the real end of this is the whole concept of the lighthouse. If you've seen any promotional images, and feel free to like Google "to the moon," images and things like that, you'll see like a lot of lighthouses, and throughout the story, River basically says that she believes that all the stars in the sky are lighthouses, so much so that the house where they live at is built right beside the lighthouse that they got married at, and River's like so obsessed with this lighthouse that she calls it Anya. She loves the lighthouse so much that she humanizes it, she gives it a name. They have like their first dance in it, which is another beautifully sweet moment. But the beauty of the symbolism for that, of River saying that the stars are lighthouses, because obviously this is a story about a man who is unfortunately passing on. He is going to die. There's no twist in that regard. There's no, "Oh, at the last minute I managed to save him," because the scientists at Sigmund Core, they are not there to save their patients. They're not there to say, "Oh, we've got a cure for your cause of death," or whatever. We're here to make this transition from death into whatever waits on the other side as comfortable as possible. And it's very poignant, because let's face it, in real life, death is, and again, I don't want to sound too morbid, but death is definitely something that we're all going to experience in our lives, whether it's people we know or of course ourselves. It's a very inevitable thing. But the whole beauty about the lighthouses, the fact that lighthouses are always, in stories and of course in real life, are basically guides. As you know, like, it's no, this isn't a Chatsunami exclusive, but the fact is, lighthouses are used as guides for these ships coming in. They might not know where they're going. This is exactly what the lighthouses / stars are doing for Johnny, because all of these stars are all around the moon, and the moon, although it's not a star, it's like their destination. They are aiming for this. They're completely getting guided towards the place that they both said that they would meet again. And I have to admit, that really hit me. I honestly thought that was just so... It was kind of a bittersweet ending because you know this man's dying, and throughout the story you see this man's life support slowly fail because, you know, he is dying. At the very end, there is just such a beautiful moment where it's a bit like, to kind of lighten things up a bit, it's like, you know that meme of the guys who they're like sitting on a chair and they look bemused? That was like me when I saw Eva erase River, but then when River came back at the end as a quote-unquote NASA person, I was the second part of that image where it's all the guys like standing up and they're cheering and they're going, yay! Like I was so happy to see that they hadn't cut out River entirely, and they do say that, they say, oh, it could have been a risk and everything. And fortunately, it absolutely wasn't, but the fact that they get to spend their final moments together going to the place that they both promised each other that they would meet again if they got lost, it's just beautiful, because I honestly thought they would be holding hands at the end, and initially they're not, and I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. But then you start to see the simulation breaking down, you start to see Johnny panicking, you know, he's looking, thinking what's going on. River just like gives him one look, just holds out her hand, he takes her hand, they end up reaching the moon, and of course there's just that symbolism as the flatline sound plays over and then the music kicks in and everything. It's just beautiful. It's something that completely blindsided me, not in terms of the story itself, but just the whole fact that I went into this game expecting something maybe good, maybe alright, but what I didn't expect was this absolutely emotional roller coaster where I was laughing, I was crying, I was, you know, like I wanted to share this game with so many people by the end of it, to which I did do that with you, Adam, so apologies, but I wanted everyone to know how beautiful and how amazing this story is. And don't get me wrong, it does have its issues, you know, it's not a perfect game, but honestly it is very close. And just one more point before I throw it back to you, Adam, but I love the storytelling in this game. The fact you start from Johnny's memories as an old man and you go back the way, because I thought initially you'd be starting as a child or you'd be able to pick and choose where you wanted to drop, but the fact you slowly go backwards, it's like watching a film in reverse. You're like, okay, well, why are they arguing at the end of River's life and he's just like a lonely old man who needs a caretaker and the two children are there? And it is just, it's something different, it's something new, it's something different, and honestly, hats off to them. They did an absolutely fantastic job for that. And there's even like a good hook at the end, I have to say, where it turns out that Neil has been taking painkillers, and we don't quite know, we don't find out in this game why he is taking them. They kind of leave that as a bit of a hook for the subsequent sequels, and that's all I can really say for it. It's just such an amazing emotional roller coaster, and I absolutely love it. But before we wrap up, is there any kind of final points you want to point out in the story?
I mean, I think it was well said. Everything you just said there about the game, like I couldn't agree more. The ending is beautiful, and it's the perfect culmination to the emotional journey that you've been on with these characters and through Johnny's life. Looking at the narrative as a whole, honestly, there's nothing I can really criticize. To be honest, I totally agree. I think it's an excellent story. I think it's really well told. I know perhaps it's a little slow in the beginning, but even then, like I wouldn't level that as a major criticism. I don't think it did. I wasn't thinking about that at all by the time I was like midway into the game, or by the end, you know, there was a bit of distant memory, so I can't really hold that against it. And yeah, I think from a narrative perspective, it's so strong and it's such an amazing experience. And again, like, you know, full marks to is it Kangao? Is it?
Yeah,
Kangao. Yeah, and I don't know if it was just him or if it was a team, but full marks to everybody who devised the story and put it together, because they did an absolutely excellent job. I do have my problems with the gameplay, and I wish there was either less of the gameplay or it was there's more depth to it. But again, I can't say that's not a reason to play this. I would highly recommend anybody play this game. He said it's a short experience. It's relatively cheap. It's on a couple of things now. You get it on Steam. You can get it on Switch. I think it's on like mobile devices as well, iOS and Android, so you can play it there if you fancy. And I think it would work. It works well on any. I played it on Steam, but I think it would work well mobile or on Switch as well. It's that kind of game, and it's just a really beautiful experience. And it's very affecting. It's melancholic. It's funny. As you said, you might get angry at some points. I mean, angry as in what's happening in the story, not angry at the game at all. So it's so well worth playing, and I'm so grateful to you that you brought it to my attention, because it's definitely one that I think would have just passed by me. Maybe I would have heard about it later on, but I'm just so glad that you brought it to my attention and that I got a chance to experience it. And yeah, the narrative really, really lived up to the hype. So I would highly recommend anyone go play this.
And honestly, I really appreciate you for taking the time to actually play this game, because when you recommended games like Edith Finch to me, and don't get me wrong, I love that game as well. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And again, we have a episode on that if you want to listen to that. But I was a little nervous going into that, because I thought, oh, what if, I don't like it and it's one of your favourite games? And then absolutely loved it, thought it was fantastic. So when it was kind of reverse, when I really enjoyed this game, and then I was like, through tears, I was like sobbing to you, going, Adam, you have to play this game, it's so good. And you're like, Satsu, I can't understand what you're saying. You're like, it's so good. But genuinely, thank you so much for giving this game a chance.
That was my pleasure, because it was such a great experience. I'm so glad I've got to play it and I've got to experience it. And as I say, I would highly recommend it to anyone. There is that funny emotions when you find, I don't know, a film, a book, a TV show, a game, whatever, a piece of music that really resonates with you and that you really love, and you get that kind of desire to share it with other people, but also that fear of sharing it and people rejecting it. I'm sure I've been through experiences like that, where I've recommended things and people just it hasn't resonated with people like it resonated with me, and it's a bit of a deflating experience. But I do think it is, it is worth, and I think it is very fulfilling to recommend things and to put yourself out there a bit, and to say, this is why I love this thing, and try and get people to play it. And maybe not everybody will feel the same way about you, but you never know. There's a chance that that person might just have the exact same reaction to you, and it's just a wonderful thing to. And I know I felt that way when I saw that you really enjoyed Edith Finch, and I could see you went away and you did all this research on it, and we were having conversations about it, and that was really fulfilling. So I'm just so glad that I got a similar experience to you playing To the Moon. And yeah, just thank you again for sharing it with me and for opening my eyes to it.
What's the equivalent of like a book club for indie games?
Oh, we should. Are you saying we should get like a Chatsunami Hall of Fame?
Like there's the joke where people read Tuesdays at Maury's.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, yeah, today we're going to be playing What Remains of Edith Finch again. It's like, yes, you're going to play it until you understand the rich, deep themes of this game.
I like it. Let's make a book club or a Hall of Fame or something like that, and get a chat. So you get like, what's that? What's Oprah? Oprah's got the Oprah recommends book thing. We should get that. The Chatsunami recommend a film, game, whatever.
That's actually not a bad shout.
We'll just go into. I just imagine us going into our local game shops and just putting stickers on things and stuff, being like, "What are you doing?" And we're like, "Chatsunami recommends," and then just scuttling away.
Yes, and just like a real red panda and talking sandwich. Yeah.
The most confusing of all.
See, that's the tactic. They're so confused that they don't have time to react. And those Redbubble stickers are sticky.
They're not coming off without a mess being made.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, that's all you can ask for. But just to reiterate your point there, yeah, if you want to check out this game, check it out on PC, as you said, on Steam, the Switch as well, which I was really surprised at. And it's also on Android and iOS, and partly Linux as well, which I'm reading like what is on, and I'm like, huh, neat. But genuinely, if you get a chance to play it, I would wholeheartedly recommend it. So please go away, play it, and yeah, that's all I can really say. So yeah, without any further ado, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. I know it was a little bit heavier than usual for a Chatsunami episode, but if you've got any favourite indie games that you would like us to have a look at, or you would like us to talk about, then if you go over to our website on Chatsunami, you can contact us and yeah, tell us what games you want us to talk about, because I'd be really interested interested to hear what you guys have to say about this. Whether you liked To the Moon, whether you liked What Remains of Edith Finch, whether you have like a completely new game that neither of us have heard of, because we love our research, don't we, Adam?
I personally can't get enough of it, so give me a task, please. I'm ready to go.
And for one free email, you two can give a intellectually hungry Adam
A starving former student a chance to do some research.
Yeah, all I'd say is, do you have to do a specific reference style, or
I only do footnotes. I'm not doing Harvard. That's my one request.
no Harvard, no Chicago?
There we go.
And I mean the reference systems, not the places. We love you. In case somebody takes that out of context, saying, no Harvard.
In case we're big in the Ivy League schools.
Exactly. None of your Yales and your... I don't even know.
Princeton's. There's another one for you.
Ah, thank you. My mind completely blanked because I was using The Simpsons as references there. I was like, oh yeah, that's the thing.
Clearly not a Yale man, are you?
No, I was more Harvard, to be honest. But yeah, on that note, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. If you would like to hear more of our awesome takes, then you can find us on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, really any good podcast app. So just look for the Red Panda under the name Satsunami, and we will see you there. But without any further ado, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. Stay safe, stay awesome, stay hydrated, and shoot for the moon.